Welcome in to Facing Reality, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ron Arnold, joined in the studio by my partner, Bill Witwicky.
Hey, we're here, Ron.
How you doing there, Colonel?
Well, I can't wait for this guest.
Yes, sir.
This guy's going to be exciting.
He is on the line with us. We'll go right straight to him and then do some introductions. See if I can get you pulled up here. Mr. Jerome Corsi, are you with us?
Yep, Ron, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful, sir. I want to thank you very much for your time this evening.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Well, good. Hey, folks, this is Dr. Jerome R. Corsi. He is the author of The Late Great USA, The Coming Merger with Mexico and Canada. And also you were co-author of, what was the book? The Unfit for Command.
Unfit for Command.
About the Swift Boat Veterans for Truth, right?
Yes, that's right. Swift Boat Veterans Speak Out Against John Kerry. I co-authored it with John O'Neill, Swift Boat veteran and my good friend of many years.
Well, good. Well, we wanted to get you on tonight to talk about your book here. And I guess the best place to probably start would be, what is the Security and Prosperity Partnership, and when did that come into being?
Right. I kind of get people going into this topic by saying, look, we're 7 years now into a war on terror, and you've got to say, why is it that we don't have our borders secured? You would think that's the very first thing we would do, secure the borders, especially since the hijackers who flew the 9/11 planes into the World Trade Center and Pentagon were all illegal aliens of one kind or another. You'd think we just secure the borders and make sure we had that problem solved. So as I looked for an explanation, what I came on was that the explanation was the Security and Prosperity Partnership of North America, which was simply declared at the end of a summit meeting President Bush held in Waco, Texas, with Vincenti Fox of Canada and Paul Martin of Canada, Vincenti Fox of Mexico. At the end of this summit in Waco, Texas, March 23, 2005, the three leaders come out and they say, we're in the Security and Prosperity Partnership in North America. And as I look, that is an agreement to integrate the three countries, to protect the border around North America, while increasingly opening the borders with Mexico and with Canada. And as I researched it, I found there was a website, a government website, spp.gov, like sampeterpaul.gov. It's a government website maintained in the Department of Commerce for the Security and Prosperity Partnership, and it lists that now we've got 20 working groups, which is our bureaucrats, meeting with the bureaucrats in Mexico and Canada, integrating and harmonizing our laws and regulations to be North American in format. No longer U.S. transportation regulations, but North American transportation regulations, and that happening across a whole wide range of policy areas.
Right. Well, we've discussed on here about the Pueblo to Panama Partnership, which is a Central American union basically that does include Mexico on its northern end and Colombia on its southern end, and we talked about the South American Union. That is so these listeners would know that these policies are the policies are being synchronized from the tip of North America to the southern tip of South America, and it overlaps like that to ensure that they all synchronize.
Well, that's right, and I mean, as we get into this, the fait accompli that accomplished this, if you take a look at the European model, over 50 years, Europe went from some economic agreements, the coal and steel agreement in 1957, and the people in Europe were told, well, this is just an economic agreement. It won't be anything more. But the elite putting into place in Europe and the multinational corporations knew that if they stayed on a path of economic integration, it would necessitate political integration in Europe, because the trade disputes would require international law to adjudicate them.
Exactly.
And so it would push everything into a European Union structure. And we're doing the same thing here. Also, the fait accompli, the Europeans were told, you're all Europeans, you can go and live and work anywhere you want to in Europe, and the populations began mixing. Well, we've now got, according to the government's own statistics, we've got 10% of Mexico's population living in the United States as Mexican national citizens. By 2010, that's going to be 20% of Mexico's population living here. And 47 Mexican consulate offices to protect their civil rights to live in our country. 1 out of every 5 people born in Mexico living in the United States as a Mexican citizen. We've already become a dual country, and nobody voted anything to make that happen. It just has happened because intentionally the border was left open and illegal immigration was not stopped and the fait accompli was created.
Well, because what you're describing, these people know this, and it's a Marxist theory. And listen to this quote right here. This is a little excerpt out of another book. Illegal immigrants are a nation within a nation, society within a society that alone possesses the numerical and positional strength to undermine the American empire from within. This nation within a nation can act to bring socialism to North America by virtue of a combined hemispheric process of revolt that overlaps boundaries and interlaces movements. So they know what they're doing. They're destroying our culture by not forcing assimilation.
Well, and also, what scares me and did in writing the book is that you've got both the left and the right here. You've got David Rockefeller on the right and the Council on Foreign Relations saying that they don't want any borders because, David Rockefeller saying, well, my business companies are operating in 50 nations and your regulations and your currencies are like a speed bump to us. And on the left, you got George Soros, who's envisioning this, world socialist community. And Soros writes that nation states belong to the time when kings had castles. So when the left and the right are both agreeing that they want nation states eliminated, I think we've got to understand that this globalism is a threat to national U.S. sovereignty, and it was intended to be, both by the left and the right. It's an attack on the middle class that will end up in the middle class being destroyed, and the United States being a nation today, like Italy's a nation. Italy's still a nation. They don't have a currency. They can't settle their own laws without the European Union bureaucrats first telling them from Brussels and Luxembourg what laws they can pass. I guess, the main thing Italy is good for as a nation is putting some colors on a soccer team that plays in the World Soccer competition.
Well, Jerry, one of
state the way it used to be.
Well, Jerry, one of the things that I'm having a hard time getting my mind around is the fact that we have elected officials, and we elected them to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. We did not elect them to circumvent that Constitution and to put us in a global-type government, a socialist-type society, and to let us be overrun by illegals from whatever country. What I can't get my mind around is why are elected officials allowing this to happen? Don't they understand what's happening, or don't they care?
I think it has to do a lot with follow the money. The major politicians on both sides of the aisle are getting funded by the same Wall Street bankers and the same multinational corporations, and they take the money and they do the agenda. And they become post-nationalist in their thinking. They themselves begin to be convinced that whatever is good for these multinational corporations has to be good for us. And the multinational corporations want to use the slaves in China. I think it's the third wave of slavery. The first wave of slavery was before the Civil War with African Americans. We didn't fight the Civil War over slavery, but by the end of it, we resolved that it was immoral to use African Americans in southern agricultural businesses as slaves. The second round, I think, was at the turn of the century, the 1900s. Everybody remembers the pictures of the kids without shoes in the mines and the abuse of women, of women working in the seamstress factories. The labor unions fought a bloody battle, and they determined that Marx was going to be wrong because we were going to include labor in the capital equation and say that labor is not going to be exploited by capital. It's going to get paid a fair working wage, a living wage, and benefits to go with it. We determined to build a middle class. And now we're allowing our politicians to go along with this third wave of slavery, saying it's okay if we don't see the Chinese slaves. That's still immoral, it's still wrong, it's still bad business, still undercuts our middle class. And the jobs that we can't send overseas, like cutting our lawns and the rest, well, we're importing an underclass from Mexico to do those jobs at slave wages. If the Mexicans and the other illegals were not subsidized by generous social welfare benefits, including free education for the children and access to the hospitals for primary medical care in the emergency rooms, the companies exploiting their labor could never get away with it. We're subsidizing the exploitation of the illegal, largely Hispanic immigrants in the United States who are doing the lower skilled jobs that can't be shipped overseas. And the entire thing is a globalization, which, like in Europe, will result in a loss of our sovereignty. But I'd like to add, it's not just our politicians who took an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Every time I go to Arlington Cemetery in Virginia, I tend to stay over there by Roslyn, right next to the Arlington Cemetery. You know, those men and women who are buried there did not fight and die for North American Union. They fought and died for the United States of America.
When I see you just mentioned that, and I'm going to tell you, I was laying in bed last night and I was looking through your book again, and I'm on about the third page here when I stopped and I read this. I don't know if you wrote it, but I read this about 10 times, and it hit me, and I started thinking about you, and now you mentioned this again, so I know that it weighs on you, but here's what it says. For the millions who, now for more than 2 centuries, have given their last true measure of devotion to preserve, protect, and defend a sovereign United States of America. That's who you've dedicated this book to,
yes,
isn't it?
I wrote that dedication, and I did that with Arlington in mind.
Well, I can feel that. I just want you to know that. But listen, we need to run to our first break, but I want to read this real quick. Quote from Zbigniew Brzezinski. He says, quote, "We cannot leap into world government in one quick step. The precondition for eventual globalization, genuine globalization, is progressive regionalization, because thereby we move to larger, more stable, more cooperative units." And that's where we are today. This is just another step toward the world government. And one last thing before we go to break. You have written an article also about this transatlantic partnership.
Yes, I have.
Which also, whenever the South American Union was negotiating one of their summits for their trade agreement down there, the Spanish entourage was present with their political advisors and economic advisors to make sure that those policies not only synchronized from North America to the tip of South America, but also with the European Union.
Well, you've got it. That's exactly what they're doing. And when this Transatlantic Economic Council puts into effect the Transatlantic Union in 2015, that'll be a huge pressure to have our side of the equation match the European Union with the North American Union.
That's right. All right, well, we need to run to a break. If you'll hold your place, we'll be right back.
Sure.